It takes time to learn how to animate. It takes time to learn how to animate.
Hi, this is Ali Arango of Little Guy CGI, and today I would like to show you how to do a kind of auto lip syncing for 2D faces in Blender 2.79. So let's get started. Okay, if this is your first time in Blender, I recommend you go to File, User Preferences, go to Input, and then choose Select with left click. Blender's default select is with right click, and this may confuse you if you're coming from Adobe programs or other 3D programs. Also, while you're in here, click on Add-ons, put a check mark next to 3D View, 3D Navigation, then scroll down. Put a check mark next to Mesh, Auto Mirror. I'll scroll down some more. Put a check mark next to Mesh, F2, Mesh, Inset Polygon, Mesh, Loop Tools, Mesh, Relax. Scroll down more. Then put a check mark next to Pi Menu, 3D Viewport Pi Menus, as well as Pi Menu, UI Pi Menu Official. Okay, this block character that you see in front of you, I'll put a link in the description for this video so you can get this character. The rigging that is on this character as far as animating the 2D face, I showed how to do in another video. I'll put a link up so you can get to that. The goal today is to do a kind of auto lip syncing for this character. Typically when you animate a face, you basically go through and do what you need to do to have the face animate. This tends to take a lot of time. This method that I've come up with, I actually came up with it in the past. I used it for animating a 3D cat. I was curious to see how you could do this as far as a 2D face, and I figured this out the other day, so I wanted to share this with you guys, and that's what we're going to do today in this tutorial. I'll put a link so you can get to the sound file.
It takes time to learn how to animate.
So basically what that sound file says is it takes time to learn how to animate. So let's go on with what we need to do this tutorial. Okay, when you look here, you can see these little faces in the background. What I'm going to do is hover my mouse here. I'm going to hold Shift. While holding Shift, I'm going to press B. Okay, let's try that again. Hold Shift, press B. And right here, you can see these mouth shapes right here. So basically, when I click here and I move this bone, basically we can select, whatever mouth that we want. So if I click here, if I want this basic smile right here, I can move this bone into place like this. However, what I also can do is go down to, I can click on this puppeteer button. It looks like a little stick man right there. What I did with this bone was in the other tutorial where I showed you how to set this up, I set up bone groups, and the bone groups are just a way of selecting bones that work with something called a pose library. So in this pose library, and that's what you see right here, this is the pose library. The reason why this is important is because, see how I move this, it takes time to position this. The pose library we can use to basically, instead of taking the time to move this bone around, we can just click a button here and we'll be able to jump to whatever pose that we want. So click here, let's see. Yeah, see that? So when I move this here over this face or over any of the faces, if I want to go to this mouth closed, I go to, it kind of looks like a magnifying glass to me. I just left click here and you can see we jump right to this particular mouth, 2D mouth. I guess you can say, this expression, I guess I should say. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to make a 3D mouth. That's going to allow us to do our auto lip sync that I was telling you about. And the way we're basically going to do this is we're going to make a 3D mouth, but the 3D mouth is going to be very flat. Because it's very flat, it should, for the most part, look just like these mouths right here. What we need to do now is we need to have a pose in the pose library where we see no mouth here. And what we can do is we'll just go to here. We'll push right here, and right here there is no mouth shape, as you can see right there. So what we'll do is we'll click plus here, and then when we click that, we see that pose. It looks like pose live. It's pose library adds add pose. We'll click add new. Here is the new pose, which is this pose right here, which is no mouth. So first you position the bone, and then you basically click, add new to put the pose in. That's how it works. So what we're going to do is we're going to put no mouth expression. Then press enter. So now if I take this bone and move it, actually I can even, just like before, I'll move it to another mouth shape. So I'll go to mouth close, I'll click this. It goes right to that. Now I can select no mouth expression and then click this, and you can see this goes to right to no mouth expression. Okay, what we need to do now is to make a 3D mouth. So how are we going to do that? What we're going to do is we're going to right click right here. This is our 3D cursor. Where the 3D cursor is in Blender is where objects tend to come into Blender at. What we're going to do now is hold shift, press A. This brings up our add to menu. We're going to go to mesh. We're then going to go to circle. So this is the circle right here. It's just rotated. So to rotate it how we need it, we're going to press R to rotate on the x-axis, 90, and then press enter to lock that in. We have our circle currently selected. You can tell it's selected because it's highlighted orange. We're currently in object mode. We want to click on one of these two arrows here and then select edit mode. So here in edit mode, we can manipulate geometry by selecting vertices here, edges here, as well as faces here. We want to left click here to select vertice. So what I am going to do is I'm going to press A to deselect. It'll be easier for us to work on this mouth shape by having this mirrored. So we're going to click tools. We're going to scroll down. We're going to look for auto mirror. If you don't see these options for auto mirror, you probably just have to click on this black triangle here. You click on that. That'll open up the auto mirror, so you'll see these options. What you're going to do is left click here. And what happened when I left click there was a mirror modifier got put on this object. So whatever I do to this side will be done to that side. If I click right here, you can see this is the mirror modifier right there. So with that done, I'm going to press A to deselect. This mouth right here, I'll hold shift, then press B. I'll draw a zoom box. This is kind of the mouth we basically want right there. So I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. When I say that's the mouth we want, this is the mouth that we're about to make here. We basically want to look like this is what I mean. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the top part of this mouth here. We're going to press B for box select. Okay, so with those vertices selected there, we're going to press S to scale on the Z-axis 0. And then I'm going to left click to lock that in. So that S to scale on the Z-axis 0, it just flattened out those vertices there. So what we're going to do now is do the same type of thing on the bottom. We're going to press A to deselect. We're going to hover here. We're going to press B for box select. We're going to left click and drag like this. Then we're going to press S to scale on the Z-axis 0 like that. So now we flattened out that area right there. So now we're just going to kind of round out. This is the basic outline shape of our mouth. If this in here is distracting you, seeing this character in the background, we can look to our left. We can select display. See what it says, view global / local. By default in Blender, you see the global view, and that is the view that allows you to see all of the different objects in your scene. When we press local view, it allows us to just focus on the object we're working on. So let's click view global / local. So when we click this, now you can see we are in local mode. So this is we can just focus a little bit more like this. So really all we want to do here is round out our edges. So I'm going to press C for paint select these vertices here. I'm going to pull up some like this. And basically what I'm doing now is I'm just trying to make this rounded out more than it was, like this. Okay, what we want to do now is we want to fill in this shape. So I'm going to press A to, there we go. I'm going to press A to deselect. We want to use grid fill to try to fill this in. With the mirror modifier on here, grid fill probably will not work. I'll show you what grid fill is in a few moments. So what we're going to do is we're going to click here. We're going to go to object mode, right? So we're in object mode, but we're still in local mode. That's why we only see this right here. Our other objects are still there in the background. We want to go to our mirror modifier and click apply. So now we have no mirror modifier. These 2 points, the two sides that made up the mirror modifier are one now. So with that done, we're going to click here, go back into edit mode. We're going to press A to select our 3D mouth. We're going to hold control, and then while holding control, we're going to press F. This brings up our faces menu. We then want to look down till we see grid fill. Then we want to left click on grid fill. So here in grid fill, we filled in all of this geometry in between our vertices, which is what we want. However, you see how it's like, it's not even. So let's try to take this up to 14, and let's take this offset up to 4. And there we go. So now this is, for the most part, this is even. The things are the things, when I say things, I mean faces. The geometry, it's for the most part, it is evened out. What we're going to do is we're on vertex select. So let's push this up. I'm going to, we'll push this up here. We can keep working on this now that we have this grid fill. We took off the mirror modifier so that we could put the grid fill in, right? And now see how I moved this vertex up? This is the vertex on the opposite side. That didn't move up. That didn't move up because we no longer have a mirror modifier. Typically, when you put a mirror modifier on, particularly the auto mirror modifier, Blender will look at this side. And when I say this side, I mean what's on the right of this 3D cursor right here, this center point here. So what we're going to do is we are going to re-put on our auto mirror. I'm going to press A. I'm going to click on tools. I'm going to scroll down, look for auto mirror, and then I'm going to left click on auto mirror. Now we have the auto mirror. Blender looked on this side and basically, deleted geometry on this side and replaced it with this geometry. It's very nice and quick. Auto mirror is spectacular. Okay, so with that done, we have our basic mouth shape in the back here, right? So what we want to do now is let's make some teeth. So I am going to click here, hold shift. While I'm holding shift, I can select all of these vertices right here. I held shift so I can select more than one vertex at a time. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate slightly. I'm going to press E to extrude. I'm then going to right click. So I just made new geometry, even though it doesn't look like I did anything. Because I have that new geometry, I'm going to take this manipulator and push forward slightly, like that. So now what I'm going to do is, with that geometry still selected, is I'm going to press E to extrude again. I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to push this down like this. This is going to eventually be our teeth. So right now you can see there's a curve here with these vertices here selected. We can press S to scale on the Z axis 0, like that. So now we basically have our teeth here. So I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, currently this mouth shape is totally flat. We want it to be thin, but not flat in the way it's flat here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll up here. I'm going to click here, go to object mode. I am going to go to display. I'm going to select view global/local. We're currently in local. Let's go back to global mode. We're going to do that by left clicking here. So there's the shape of our mouth. Let's press S to scale this down to about how we would want the mouth to be. I'll press S to scale to make it wider, like that. You see how the mouth is flat here, and our head that we want this mouth to basically work with is curved. So what we can do to help with that is we can go to here. This is our snapping option. When we click this, we turn on snapping for Blender. We can click here. We'll select face. And then what we want to do is see this button right here. We want to click this button. And basically what that will do is this will snap this being this object. It's going to be our 3D mouth to our head back here. This should give us the basic shape of our head as far as this like looking like it's on the head. So what we're going to do is we're going to click here. We're going to go to edit mode. We're going to press A to select all of our geometry. Then we're going to press G and then left click. Then when we press G, as you can see now, our mesh is totally flat and it is bending right with the shape of our character's head, and that's what we want. Okay, so now that we have this not being so flat, what we want to do is I'm going to click here. I'm going to go to object mode. I'm going to click here to turn snapping off. So now we're going to click here, go back to edit mode. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to go to face select. I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm rolling the mouse wheel to zoom in. I'm holding shift and middle mouse button to pan. Rolling the mouse wheel to zoom in. When we snap this, this went totally flat. So what I'm trying to do is that little piece right here that's our teeth, I'm trying to push that out. We just want it to be just slightly. I'm going to click here. I'm going to hold control, then click here. That uses something in Blender called the shortest path. Okay. I thought I had this edge right here at the other edge, so now I just pull back and I'm going to click this edge. Now I can say it. I'm going to hold control, then click here. I'm pushing this forward to match up with our teeth right there. I'm going to click here, hold control, pull our teeth back because we want this to be thin. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to click here. I'm going to click here. I clicked face select. I'm going to hold shift. I am going to press H to hide our teeth. I'm going to click here. I'm going to click new. I am then going to change this to black. I'm now going to click the plus to the right. There's two pluses. There's a plus here, the plus here. You want the plus to the right. I'm going to hold Alt. While holding Alt, I'm going to press H. And now I'm going to click new. I'm going to click here. I'm going to raise this all the way up so that it is white. Press C and paint select our teeth. I'm going to click assign so we have our white teeth there. Now when you do this, because we're trying to make this look 2D, you want this black line here. So you don't want just the yellow and the black. So it's there. I'm holding control as I click and I'm just pushing this down slightly, and I'm doing that just because I want that black line to be there. I am also going to scroll down here. I'm going to make this shadeless. I'm going to click on this material. I'm going to also click shadeless for that as well. Okay, what we're going to do now is click here. We're going to go to object mode. I'm going to zoom back. I'm going to right click here. I'm going to hold shift. Then while holding shift, press A. This brings up our add to menu. I'm going to go to mesh. I'm then going to go to circle. I'm going to press R to rotate on the x-axis 90 and then press enter to lock that in. I'm going to press S to scale this down. This is eventually going to be our tongue. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate to the side, take the manipulator, push that forward, hold the middle mouse button to turn back towards the front. Move this towards in between the eyes. So imagine just the center line right here. I'll push this out some like that. I'll zoom in. I'm with this selected. I'm going to click here. Go to edit mode. I'm going to go to vertex select. I am going to, with all of these vertices selected, I'm going to hold control, press F. This brings up our faces menu. I'm then going to select grid fill. So now we have this grid fill right here. This is fine. It was 8. And see how it's even there. So what we can do is just press R to rotate on the y-axis like that. That's good. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to press S to shrink this down. We'll position it about like this. I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to click here. I'm going to hold Alt. I'll zoom in. I'll hold Shift and the mouse button. I'm just going to go to, we're on face select, so we're going to select this edge here. So I'm holding Shift. And as I'm holding Shift, when I say edge, I mean these faces. This is what I mean, row of faces. I let go of Shift. Now what we're going to do is press X to bring up our delete menu. We're going to choose faces to delete. So with that done, let's click front with the graphic. Let's click here, go back to object mode. Let's turn on snapping, and then let's go to edit mode. Let's press A and then G. When I press G, the reason why I'm doing that, I press A to select all the geometry, and then G basically makes this snap to the face. So now I left click to lock that in. Now I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to click here, go to object mode. I'm going to turn off snapping. Now with this selected, I'm going to hold Shift. And then while holding Shift, I'm going to left click here on our 3D mouth here. I'm going to hold Control. And then while holding Control, I'm going to press J. Now what just happened is that shape is now one with this shape. So both these two shapes were joined. We'll click here to go to edit mode. When we hover here and press L, okay, now we can see this right here. I'm going to press L now, and there's the part that's basically going to be our tongue. And what we can do is we can, with our material select, we can click this plus button that's to the right, click new, we'll click diffuse, and then let's pick a red color. Then we'll click assign to turn this red. Let's push this towards itself. See how it's disappearing? It's because it's going into the background. What we'll do is hold the middle mouse button, and we'll just push this out like that. So we have our basic tongue shape right there. I'm going to zoom back. That's kind of what we're going for right here. So let's zoom into this. Let's We'll zoom in more. Let's press L. Push this out very slightly. We'll click here. We'll hold shift and we'll select these bottom row faces. We'll then press X to bring up our delete menu. We'll then choose faces to delete. Now what we're going to do is click edge select. So we clicked edge select right there. We're going to hold shift, then click here. And with that selected, we're going to press S to scale and the Z axis 0 to flatten that out. Then we'll left click to lock that in. We'll then press A to deselect. Okay, so let's take a look at our mouth right there. I'm looking to see the teeth. This is a little bit less wide than the teeth. So what we can do is we can press L and we'll pull this something like that to make it wider. We can press S to scale the X axis like that. Let's also, with this red color selected, click shadeless. Okay, so with that done, what we want to do now is make it so our mouth can basically shut. So currently we're in material view. That's why we can see the colors. I'm going to click here and go to solid view. Okay, we can still see the colors. Okay, what we want to do is go to vertex select. I'm going to hold Alt and then I'm going to hold Shift and Alt now. And what I'm trying to do is select, I let go of Alt for a second. There we go. We want to select, you could do this manually just by holding Shift. Alt tends to let you select loops, edge loops. We don't want the teeth selected. I'm zooming in to try to, I'm going to go to view global / local. There we go. Okay, so we want this mouth to be able to shut. So we need to have some depth to this outer part of the mouth. So that's why we have this, all of these vertices on the, outside of our mouth shape or towards the outside, however you want to put it, selected. Okay, so with all of those vertices selected, we're going to press E to extrude. We're going to right click to those. That extrusion stays in place. When we pressed E to extrude, we made new geometry, and that new geometry allows us to push forward. Now we just want this to be just enough. When I say this, I mean how we're pushing this forward, just enough to cover our teeth and the tongue. Okay, so with that, we're going to press E to extrude, right click, we're going to press S to scale. This just gives us a little more geometry to play with. I'm just holding the mouse button to rotate view. I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to go to face select. I'm going to hover here. I pressed L while I was hovering there. So I hovered here, then I pressed L. Now I'm pushing this down like that. I'm going to press A to deselect. Let's click here to go back to global view. And we'll click here to go back to our material view. So we have our mouth shape right there. So now we have our mouth shape. So what we want to do is go to object mode. So here in object mode, what we want to do now is click right here. Okay, what we want to do is we want to put a shape key on this. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to look to shape keys right here. We're going to click plus. Now we click plus. This basis here is something that this is basically our base that we work from here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to click plus again. So now this new shape key is the shape key that we're going to use to edit this mouth shape so that we can animate it. So what we're going to do is we're going to click here. We're then going to go to edit mode. So here in edit mode, what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in. I'm going to grab that edge. So I'm going to go to edge select. I'm going to hold alt and then click here. And I just want to select this entire edge here. So I'm going to press O to turn on our proportional editing tool. And actually I'm going to hold alt and then press O to turn on connected proportional editing. See this little symbol right here that's showing us that our connected proportional editing is on. What proportional editing is it is a way in Blender that you can use more than one vertice or vertex, edge, or face at a time. So what we're going to do is we're going to press G. When we press G, see that circle there? I'm rolling the mouse wheel to change the size of that circle. That circle shows us the influence of our proportional editing tool. What we want to do is we want to press S and then Z, like this. Okay. I right clicked. Okay, so by me grabbing here and having the connected proportional editing on, I didn't grab the tongue as well. So I'm going to press O. When I pressed O, now we went to regular proportional editing. Let's try this again. We're going to press S to scale on the Z axis. There we go. Now we're grabbing the entire mouth shape. So what we want to do is get this down almost to a line. I'm going to I don't want the teeth going out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press O to turn off the proportional editing tool. I'm going to press S to scale on the Z axis. Adjust the mouth like that. I'm going to press S to scale on the X axis like that. And I'm going to press A to deselect and A to select everything. I'm going to press S to scale like that. I'm going to press A to deselect now. Okay, what we're going to do is roll our mouse back. We're going to click here, go to object mode. And then what we're going to do is we are going to click here. We're then going to select new shape from mix. Then what we're going to do is we're going to click here. We're going to take this value all the way up. We're now going to click on our basis. We're going to click minus. So now this mouth shut is our new basis. So what we're going to do is we're going to click here, take this value all the way up, and that is just what we want. We're going to name this talk and then press enter to lock that in. Okay, what we want to do now is put in an armature bone to control the shape key. Let's go to display, click front. We're in front orthographic, which is good. I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to mouse button to pan. I'm going to right click right here. I put the 3D cursor there because in Blender where your 3D cursor is at is where objects tend to come into Blender at. With the 3D cursor there, I'm going to hold shift. While holding shift, I'm going to press A. This brings up our add to menu. So I am on armature. I'm then going to select a single bone. So there's our armature bone there. We're going to click here. We're going to name this talk armature and then press enter. With this bone selected, we're going to click here. We're going to go to edit mode. With the top of the bone selected, we're going to push down to make this bone smaller. We're going to click right on the bone and see right here, this is the name of the bone. We're going to click here. We're going to name this talk. Okay, so with that done, we're going to press A to deselect. We're going to click here, go to object mode. We're going to click on our 3D mouth shape here. We are then going to look to our shape keys here. And what we're about to do is to add a driver onto this talk shape key. However, before we do that, we're currently in Blender's default mode. We're going to click here. We're then going to select animation. And this allows us to animate easily. It will also allow us to work easily as far as working with this shape key. So I'm going to scroll this up so we can just see that there. Okay, so with this, all the way upward with our shape key visible here, I'm going to right click here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to I'm hovering over add driver, okay? I'm hovering over add driver. I didn't click anything. I right click, this menu popped up. Now I'm hovering over add driver, and while hovering over add driver, I'm going to go over to manually create later single. Now I'm going to left click. Okay, so when I did that, now we have a driver on this. Now we need to connect this driver to our armature bone. So what we're going to do is look to here. See where it says F curve here? We're going to click here, and we're going to change this from F curve to driver. So I'm going to left click there. I'm going to hover here to give us more room. I'm going to click here, click this arrow here, and then here is our shape key and the driver for our shape key. So I'm going to left click here. So with this selected here, what I want to do is press the N key. When I press the N key, our properties panel for our drivers menu popped up. So now I'm going to select drivers. So now we have these options here. What we want to do is look to where we see scripted expression. We want to click here, and then we want to select averaged value. And now when we did that, our options changed. Now we see this right here. Don't let that concern you. This right here is looking for our armature. So our armature, remember, is called talk armature. So we're going to left click here. We see these two armatures there. We don't see our talk armature. So to get to our talk armature, we're going to press T and then A. Now when we did that, Blender, looked and it found basically our talk armature. So we're going to left click. So now we have our talk armature here. So now we're going to left click here for the bone, and we're going to select our talk bone. So we left click there. So now we see this type is X location. So think of X is going like this. And as far as our type here, I think is Y is going like this. So we want to change this from X location to Y location. And then when we see world space here, we want to change this from world space to local space. I'm going to left click there. Okay, so now I'm going to press the N key. So we have this bone here, right? I clicked on the bone. This is our talk bone. Now see, we're in object mode. You don't want to be in object mode. You want to click here, and you want to go to pose mode. So here in pose mode, I'll re-click that bone again. So now when I push this up, you can see this bone is controlling our shape key. All right, so now I'm going to right click to get that bone to go back to its original position. We had this set up previously to animate easier before this tutorial. What we're going to do is we're going to click X to take that away. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to click here, and I'm going to select location. All this thing is right here, or what I use it for is I use this to, when I press I, to just have Blender put in what I selected here, which is location. So when we press I, we'll be able to put a location in for this. So we're about to do our, what I call auto lip syncing. It's not fully auto, but it largely helps. What we want to do is let's look here. See, this says start 1 in 23. Let's take this up to 250, which is Blender's standard in, which is about 10 seconds. For this start, let's click this arrow here to take this to 0. And we'll click this so that our timeline indicator is on 0. Okay, what we're going to do now is with our bone selected here, with our location here, we're going to press I. When we pressed I, a keyframe was put in for right here. There's a little yellow line there showing that we have a keyframe there. So now what we're going to do is look to where we see drivers. We're going to click here, and then we're going to change this to F curve. What we're going to do now is click here. We're going to click on this triangle here. Now we see these options set up here. And what we want to do is get rid of this X location by selecting this, then pressing X. The Z location, we're going to click here and then press X to get rid of that. Now we're going to select right on this Y location. And this, with this selected, what we're going to do now is we're going to select key, and then we're going to go to bake sounds to F curves. So now we're going to left click here. I'm going to go to my desktop. I have a sound file that I previously recorded. I'm going to left click here to select it. I'm now going to select bake sound to F curves. Okay, when you look right here, this is actually the animation. Animation is actually already set to be on our bone. However, we won't be able to hear it. So I'll hold them in the mouse button to pull, and you can see our mouth is automatically animating, but we can't hear. So to be able to hear, what we're going to do is I took this back to 0 as far as the frame that we're on. I'm going to hover over this little, looks like a triangle with stripes in it. I'm going to left click and drag this up like that. And then with that, I'm going to click here. I'm then going to select video sequence editor. So I'm going to left click there. And in this little window is our video sequence editor. It's another part of Blender. We're going to be using this so we can hear our sound file. So what we're going to do is we're going to select add, and then we're going to go to sounds. We're going to left click on sound. And now we're going to select that same sound that we use to bake the sound to our F curve. So I'm going to left click here, and now I'm going to click add sound strip. So now I'm going to click playback here. I'm going to select audio scrubbing. I'm going to click playback here again. And this just makes it so that when you pull that timeline indicator, you can hear the sound. I'm also going to select AV sync. And this makes it so that the sound file tries to stay in sync with our animation. So now I'm going to play this.
It takes time to learn how to animate.
And there you can see that our shape key basically has our mouth animating with our bone shape right there, which is very cool. I can right click here, and then I can click and drag.
It takes time to learn how to animate.
Very cool. Okay, what we want to do now is we want to have our mouth, as far as our 3D shape, be able to disappear. For our 2D shapes, we have this set up so we can have we have a setting in our pose library where these mouth shapes don't show. We want the same thing for our 3D mouth. So we're going to click here. We're going to look to our shape keys here. We're going to click plus. Okay, so when we click plus, we have this new shape key. So first you hit plus to make the shape key. Then you actually set up how the shape key is, how you want it to be. So we're going to click here. We're going to go to edit mode. We're going to select vertex select. We're going to press A to select all of our geometry. We're going to take advantage of the fact that this 3D mouth is right on the surface pretty much of our character head. I'm going to hold them in the mouse button to rotate the view. We're going to just pull that mouth inside of the head. We're then going to press A to deselect. I'm going to hold them in the mouse button to rotate the view. I'm then going to click here and then click here to go to object mode. So now I'm going to double click here. I'm going to name this mouth disappear and then press enter. And then now when I scroll down here, when I take this value up, you'll see that our mouth disappears, which is what we want. So I'm going to press A to deselect. So with that done, let's click here to go back to the beginning of our timeline. Okay, I find that ooze are good to, ooze is a pretty different shape than just having your mouth open and shut. So what we're going to do is right click and drag.
It takes time to
See that ooze?
to learn to.
So there's ooh right there.
It takes time to.
So t is right there, right? So what we can do here, as far as additional animation, I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to, not that, I'm going to grab here. I'll just hover it over there. By hovering over here, I have these two arrows. I just pull to the side there. So there's ooh right here that I want, right? So what I am going to do is right here at the timeline indicator, this is where ooh should be, right? Another thing we can help that I'll show you. I'm going to hold control and hold the middle mouse button. I'm holding let go of control. And what I'm doing is I am dragging by holding the middle mouse button this sound here. So I'm holding control to make this bigger, right? I'm holding the middle mouse button now, let go of control. What I'm going to do is select view. I'm going to go to waveform drawing, and I'm going to select waveforms on. So now we can actually see, this can actually help us as we work with our sound file. So our ooh sound is here. So let's see.
Now I'm to learn.
So the ooh is like right there.
Now I'm
Ooh starts like right here. So what we're going to do, we already have our, what I call auto lip syncing, making our mouth move. What we're going to do is we want an ooh sound. So we're going to click here. And what we're going to do is we're going to move this up. Oops. I'm going to right click to get that jump into place. That's the wrong bone. We're going to click here. We're going to have with this mouth disappear on. We're going to take this value up, right? What we're going to do is we're going to press I to have that up. Okay, while we have this 3D mouth selected, when we look here, it's currently named circle. It's named circle because it came from a circle. We're going to double click here, name this 3D mouth, then press enter to lock that in. And we have this disappearing here. Now what we want to do is go one frame back and then make sure that we have this setting turned all the way down and press I here. Because we want the mouth to show up.
It takes time.
But we want it to disappear now here. So here where it's going to disappear, now what we want to do is click this bone right here. We're going to take this bone up and move this over this O shape. We'll put this into position. And now that we have that in position, so we don't have to do that again, we'll make a pose library pose for it so we can just automatically have it go back to that O shape. So to do that, we're going to click this plus. We'll click add new. We'll double click here. We'll name this O sound. And then now with that done, and with our 3D viewport over here, what we're going to do is we're going to press I, right? So now we'll hover here, hold the right mouse button. So right here goes the L, so the ooh is here. So right here, what we want to do is press I again. So we're saying, look, Blender, have this shape be from here to here, right? Because this is the first keyframe we have in here, we need to go here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go to no mouth expression. We're going to click what looks like this magnifying glass. Then we're going to hover here and then press I here. So there's the O. Now we want to have this disappear here. So what we're going to do is we're going to click this with this no mouth expression here. We'll click here, hover here, then press I, right? Now with that done, now we need to bring our 3D mouth back. So we're going to click here. We're going to scroll up here. Here's our mouth disappear over here. So we're going to take this setting back to here. So with that done, we're going to press I here. So let's... Now, we want our mouth to appear here, but here we want it to still be disappeared. So we'll take this setting all the way up. We'll press I here. There we go.
It takes time to learn how to. It takes time to learn how to.
Okay, so I'm just holding the right mouse button to scrub through our sound to see how this looks. I'm going to click here and then hit just play.
It takes time to learn how to animate.
Good so far. Okay, so we have that one O sound in there. We have that how in there. How, right? So
To learn
so the ow is like right here. Between 60 from 60 for a few frames. So what we can do is we do pretty much the same thing again. And one thing that is cool, let's see, show you this. When I click this bone here, right? This right here is a setup for the bone to appear, the shape, basically the O shape to appear and disappear, right? That's what this is right here. I'll hover here and drag this down so you can see that. So if I press A to select all of the shapes there, let's see if this will work. So I pressed A, I have all of these shapes selected. So here is, I know where that owl sound is at. So let's try pressing Shift D and just taking those sounds and lining them up here. And this should be the owl sound. So let's see. We duplicated these sounds, which is basically O, like coming on, disappearing, all that. And now we did that, we just moved them down to where we have this other O sound. So let's see if
time to learn how to animate.
So it appears very similar to before. So it just cut off some work for us. So now we need the 3D mount to disappear. And we know that right here, this we can see these are where the keyframes are at for our O sound. So what we're going to do is click on our 3D mouth. We're going to take this first. We're going to go back one frame. We'll click I. We'll click forward one frame. We'll raise this to 1. We'll press I. Okay, I can see we need the mouth here. We don't want that mouth to disappear, so guess what? We'll fix it just by taking this down here. We'll press I here. So this next frame here. So I'm going to press I, and now I'm going to take this up to 1, press I. So we'll press I here, go over 1, and now we'll take this down, then press I. Okay, I'm going to click here, then hit play.
It takes time to learn how to animate.
So what I'm going to do is this is past where the sound's at, so I'm going to press E to end our timeline there.
It takes time to learn how to animate.
And that looks good. Now we can add
Time
in
to learn.
eye expression here. So I say it takes time to learn how to animate. So I can imagine I would say it takes time and raise my eyebrows up. So
It takes time.
So right here, what we can do is go to frame 35 where you can start to hear that T, that time. I'll click back 1. I'll click here, and then I'll press I to put a keyframe in for this pose. I'll click to go over 1, and now I'll go to where the eyebrows are raised up, like this. And then I'll look to our bone groups. I'll go down to our pose library. I'll click here. I'll click add new. And I'll name this eyebrows up and then press enter. So now what I'll do is I'll press I for that.
It takes time.
I'm thinking the whole time he says time, the eyebrows are up.
It takes time.
and then have them go back. So I'll hit I again, and then I'll click here, and then I'll go back to, actually the blank expression should be here, so I'll click here, then I'll just click that. So now I'll just press I. So let's see how it looks.
It takes time to learn how to animate.
I like that. Okay, let's add in a blank.
It takes time. It takes.
So I'm thinking when it says takes, we have in blank. So So for there, what we're going to do is, this is where I want the blank to start. So I put my timeline indicator here. I'll click here to go back one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press I so that we have this keyframe locked in. I'll click here. And now what I'm going to do is move this up to our blank here. I'll now go to our pose library. I'll click here. I'll click the plus. I'll click add new. I'll double click here. I'll name this blank. Press enter. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press I. Typically a blank lasts, I believe, 3 frames. So we'll go, there's 1 frame, 2, 3. And then I'm going to, this is moving. So I'm going to click here to get it right back to that exact position. I'll press I. So now I'll click here. Then I'll click here for blank expression. I'll click here. And then I'll press I here. So
it takes time to learn. It takes time to. It takes time to learn how to learn. It takes time.
Now what we can do to make sure that our eyes don't move when we don't want is we can press A to select all of our keyframes here. We can press T. This brings up our interpolation mode. And what we want to have this set is for constant. Blender's default interpolation is Bezier. And what that does is that make things, when you animate things, it makes them start to move like from slow and then faster, and then when your animation comes to an end, it starts to go from faster to slower. Constant makes us jump from one keyframe to another, and for dealing with this Lego type animation for our shape keys, we don't want this for our mouth, 3D mouth shape, by the way, just for our images, for our 2D eyes as well as our 2D mouth, not for our 3D mouth. So I'm going to select constant. So let's go back.
It takes time to learn how to animate.
Good. Okay, let me play this again.
It takes time to learn how to animate.
So I figure right where it says animate, he can blank again. So
to learn how to animate.
So right there. So what we'll do is we'll, with this bone selected, we'll press I, then we'll click over. We'll go to blank, we'll left click here, we'll click here, we'll then press I. Right here we'll go 1, 2, 3. We'll press I. And then we'll click over one more, and then we'll go to blank expression. We'll click here, then we'll press I. So now let's click here to go back.
It takes time to learn how to animate.
There we go.
It takes time to learn how to animate. It takes time to learn how to animate. It takes time to learn how to animate.
Good. Okay, so very seldomly when someone moves do they keep their head perfectly straight. So what we're going to do is we're going to click here to go back to the beginning of our timeline. We're going to hold shift, and then while holding shift, we're going to click here. So this is the armature that controls the body of our character. What we need to do is first click on our bone for our head right here. And then with that done, we need to click on our 3D mouth in that order. With the 3D mouth clicked on, we're going to hold shift, and then while holding shift, we're going to left click on our armature bone. We're then going to let go of shift. We're going to hold control. While holding control, we're going to press P. This brings up our set parent to menu. Then we're going to select bone. Okay, from us doing that, now our 3D mouth should move along with the rest of our shape. So when we click here, I press R to rotate. I press R twice actually. Now we can move our head, and our 3D mouth moves right along. Okay, so we did that. So now we have the ability to move our head. So what we want to do is put some head motion in as our character talks. One of the ways that I found that the easiest way to do that is to just do to manually move our head as the sound plays. So what we're going to do is we are going to click here to turn on auto keyframing, and what this means is whatever we do here is going to be recorded here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to basically, with this selected, we're going to click play, then quickly move our mouse over here, press R twice, and then we're going to manually control just by moving our mouse how the head moves, and then we'll stop this from moving. So here we go. I'm going to click play.
It takes time to learn how to animate.
Then left
It
click.
takes time to learn how to animate.
Good.
It takes time to learn how to animate.
So now we have some head movement in as our character talks. I'll click here to turn off that auto keyframing button there. And now what we can do is, we'll click here to select all of these keyframes here. Okay, we selected these keyframes here because sometimes when you do auto keyframing, like we just did, you'll have somewhat of a jerky movement. So what we're going to do is with all these keyframes here selected, we're going to press the space bar. We're going to select search. We're going to search for simplify F curves. It's already in there. If you just put in SIM, this will probably pop up. Then what you want to do is left click here. That did not simplify your F curves yet, because basically we selected here, right? Our keyframes here, and then our F curves right here. So when we selected here, we selected our F curves as well. So what you want to do is see where it says simplify F curves here. You want to click here and change this to 0.02 and then press enter. And now our F curves should be smoothed out. So now
it takes time to learn how to animate.
And what that tends to do is just make your motion a little bit less jerky. Okay, so what I'm going to do is hold shift, and then I'll click here to take away our armature away from, out of view. So I'll just click, let's go back here, click play.
It takes time to learn how to animate.
Nice.
It takes time to learn how to animate.
Okay, and I like how that turned out. Hopefully you can see, I'm just taking this back to the beginning. Hopefully you can see from this like what you can do. If you need fast lip syncing, you can pretty much use that sound file and have your mouth. At least it'll have some movement that is going along with your sound file that you choose. If you have time, you can add extra details like we did in this video. So I hope that this video helps you out. Okay, guys, that's it for that tutorial. For all of those of you out there who like the videos on this channel and we share them, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And for those of you who are new to this channel, if you like the videos on this channel, you would like to see more, please subscribe, and thank you for viewing.